In the Wheel of Time, the Forsaken are among the most powerful and feared beings in existence. Once revered as the greatest Aes Sedai of the Age of Legends, they betrayed humanity and pledged loyalty to the Dark One in exchange for immortality, forbidden knowledge, and unimaginable power. For over 3,000 years, they remained sealed away, but as the Dark One's influence grew, they were gradually released back into the world, bringing chaos, war, and destruction. Each Forsaken possesses incredible strength in the One power, but their real danger lies in their intelligence, ruthlessness, and centuries of experience. Though they serve the Shadow, they are not a unified force. Each Forsaken has their own ambitions, rivalries, and schemes, making them just as dangerous to one another as they are to the forces of light. Let's break down each of the 13 Forsaken, exploring who they were, what made them terrifying, and how they influenced the world of the Wheel of Time. 1. Ishamael. Ishamael, whose original name was Elon Morin Tedranai, was the greatest philosopher of the Age of Legends. Unlike the other Forsaken, who turned to the Shadow for power or ambition, Ishamael genuinely believed that the Dark One would eventually win and that all existence was meaningless. As the Dark One's most devoted servant, he became the de facto leader of the Forsaken, though his relationship with them was complex. He did not seek personal power, nor did he care about ruling the world. He only sought the end of everything. Ishamael is unique among the Forsaken because he was never fully sealed away like the others. Instead, he was periodically able to influence the world throughout history, keeping the cycle of conflict alive by corrupting rulers, spreading war, and ensuring that humanity never truly escaped the Shadow's grasp. His manipulations helped create the Trolloc Wars, the collapse of great kingdoms, and the weakening of the White Tower. Upon his full release, he becomes the Dark One's right hand, leading the forces of the Shadow against Rand Althor and the champions of the Light. However, his fatal flaw is that, despite his power, he is a nihilist who ultimately underestimates humanity's will to fight back. 2. Lanfear. Lanfear, originally named Myron Aranale, was one of the most powerful female channelers of the Age of Legends. She was known for her obsessive love for Luz Theron Telamon, the man who would later become the Dragon Reborn. Unlike most Forsaken, Lanfear did not turn to the Shadow for power or revenge against society. She did so out of jealousy and desire. When Luz Theron rejected her, she became consumed by bitterness and sought to unlock a power greater than the One power, hoping to elevate herself above even the Aes Sedai. This led to the discovery of the Dark One's prison, resulting in the War of Power and the ultimate breaking of the world. Lanfear is one of the most cunning and unpredictable Forsaken. Unlike the others, who see the Dragon Reborn as an enemy, Lanfear believes she can bend Rand Althor to her will, making him her king, her lover, and the ruler of a world where she holds ultimate power. Her ability to manipulate Teleran Riot, the world of dreams, makes her especially dangerous, allowing her to influence reality in ways few can counter. However, her downfall is her obsessive nature. She cares more about claiming Rand for herself than about truly serving the Dark One. 3. Demandred. Demandred, born Barad Bel Medar, was one of the most gifted generals and channelers of the Age of Legends, second only to Luz Theron Telamon. This fact haunted him his entire life. No matter how strong, intelligent, or capable he was always overshadowed by the dragon. His hatred for Luz Theron grew over time, and when the opportunity arose, he turned to the Dark One, hoping to finally surpass his rival and claim the world for himself. Demandred's obsession with Luz Theron defined his entire existence. Unlike other Forsaken, who sought power for themselves, Demandred wanted only one thing: to prove he was better than Luz Theron. After being freed, he disappears for years, secretly establishing the Empire of Shera, an isolated and powerful nation. He gathers a massive army, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. During the last battle, he emerges as the greatest general of the Shadow, leading an overwhelming force that nearly crushes the armies of light. Demandred is one of the deadliest Forsaken, not just because of his strength in the One power, but because of his military brilliance and sheer hatred. His downfall, however, is his obsession. His belief that he could defeat Rand blinds him to the true complexities of the pattern. 4. Graendal. Graendal, originally Camaril Maradim Neen Dar, was once a respected psychiatrist and healer in the Age of Legends. However, over time, she became obsessed with pleasure, indulgence, and absolute control over others. Unlike the other Forsaken, who turned to the shadow for revenge or ambition, Graendal did so out of pure decadence. She saw the world as pointless and cruel, and rather than trying to change it, she chose to embrace its worst aspects. Her specialty was compulsion, a terrifying weave of the one power that allowed her to completely dominate the minds of others, turning them into obedient slaves. She surrounded herself with only the most beautiful and intelligent individuals, stripping them of free will and using them for her own amusement. Despite her hedonistic nature, Graendal was one of the most cunning and dangerous Forsaken. She was a master of deception, strategy, and psychological warfare, often allowing her enemies to believe they had won only to reveal that she had been controlling them all along. Her greatest strength was her ability to manipulate people without them even realizing it, making her one of the most insidious and terrifying enemies of the light. 5. Ishamael. Ishamael, originally known as Tel Janin A. Lenser, was one of the most gifted military commanders of the Age of Legends. He was known for his brilliant battlefield tactics, but also for his ruthless and prideful nature. Much like Demandred, Ishamael was constantly overshadowed by Luz Darren Telamon, which led to deep resentment and an eventual turn to the shadow. Unlike some of the other Forsaken, who sought personal power, revenge, or pure chaos, Ishamael's motivations were simpler but just as dangerous. He wanted to prove that he was the greatest general the world had ever seen. He believed that the Dark One would reshape the world in his image, and he wanted to be at the top of that new order. Ishamael was known for his signature golden armor and battlefield presence, commanding armies with absolute precision and discipline. After being released from his prison, he quickly established control over Ilion, one of the most powerful nations in the Westlands, using it as a base of operations to wage war against Rand al'Thor. Despite his military genius, Ishamael's greatest weakness was his pride. He could not stand the idea of facing Rand head-on unless he was sure of victory, which made him hesitate at crucial moments. In the end, his overconfidence led to his downfall, as he underestimated Rand and the forces of the light. 6. Semirhage. Semirhage, born Nemine Damender Bone, was once a highly respected healer in the Age of Legends. However, she harbored a dark secret. She found pleasure in causing pain rather than healing. As a result, she was disgraced and cast out by the Aes Sedai of her time. When the Dark One offered her the chance to serve him, she embraced the shadow wholeheartedly, becoming one of the most feared figures in history. Semirhage's skill in breaking the minds of her enemies made her a terrifying force. She was not just a torturer, she was a master manipulator, able to destroy a person's identity and rebuild them as her perfect puppet. Even the most strong-willed individuals could not withstand her methods. After her release, she worked to destabilize Rand al'Thor's alliances, using political maneuvering and psychological terror to weaken him. One of her most infamous acts was disguising herself as an emissary from the Shanchan Empire and nearly breaking Rand's mind through sheer cruelty. Her downfall came when she underestimated Rand's resistance. Despite her terrifying abilities, she was ultimately captured and executed, proving that even the most sadistic of the Forsaken could not escape justice. 7. Asmodean. Asmodean, originally Jor Adam Nessison, was different from the other Forsaken in that he was never truly a warrior or ruler. He was an artist, a musician of extraordinary talent. However, his desire for immortality and a life of endless indulgence led him to turn to the shadow, believing that serving the Dark One would grant him eternal fame and luxury. Unlike Forsaken like Ishamael or Graendal, Asmodean was not particularly ambitious. He did not seek power for conquest, he sought it to ensure his own pleasure and survival. However, when he was freed, he found himself caught in the middle of a war that he wanted no part of. In a shocking twist, Asmodean defected from the Forsaken and became Rand al'Thor's unwilling teacher, training him in the One Power. Rand needed guidance, and Asmodean, fearing the other Forsaken more than Rand, reluctantly took the role of his instructor. However, his time with Rand sealed his fate. The Forsaken saw him as a traitor, and in the end, he was mysteriously assassinated. His death remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Wheel of Time, with multiple theories about which Forsaken finally silenced him. 8. Moghedien. Moghedien, originally Leyland Moiral, was a Forsaken unlike any other. She did not command armies like Demandred or Samel, nor did she openly manipulate nations like Graendal. Instead, she was an assassin, a saboteur, and a master of subtlety, preferring to work from the shadows rather than confront enemies head-on. Her strength was not in raw power, but in stealth, deception, and psychological warfare. She struck only when she was certain of victory, vanishing before her enemies even knew she was there. This is why she was given the name Moghedien, after a deadly spider that lurks unseen before delivering a lethal bite. One of her most terrifying abilities was her skill in Teleran Riad, the world of dreams. She could manipulate dreams, invade minds, and strike without warning, making her a nightmare opponent for those who did not understand the realm of dreams. Despite her cunning, Moghedien's greatest weakness was her cowardice. She avoided direct confrontation at all costs, which led to her eventual capture. She was enslaved with a mind control device called a Kursuvra, forced to serve her enemies as punishment for her failure. 9. Baltamel. Baltamel, originally named Eval Ramman, was once a highly respected historian, researcher, and philosopher during the Age of Legends. He was known for his brilliant mind, deep understanding of human civilizations, and knowledge of lost cultures. However, unlike his contemporary scholars, Baltamel was not content with merely studying history. He wanted to shape it, to leave his own mark upon the world. Though he was never as politically influential as figures like Ishamael or Demandred, Balthamel's research led him to unearth ancient secrets of power, including forbidden knowledge about the Shadow. This, combined with his growing thirst for pleasure and decadence, led him down a dark path. In the Age of Legends, he was renowned for his indulgent lifestyle, frequenting extravagant parties, secret societies, and pushing the limits of morality in pursuit of personal enjoyment. When the War of Power broke out, Baltamel openly defected to the Shadow, believing that under the Dark One's rule, he would be free to indulge in any pleasure he desired without restriction. His betrayal of humanity was not motivated by ideology or hatred, it was purely selfish. He saw the forces of the light as restrictive, bound by laws and ethics, while the Shadow offered freedom to do whatever one pleased. However, his greed and arrogance led to his downfall. When Luz Therin and his followers sealed the Dark One and the Forsaken away, Baltamel was trapped in the Bore for over 3,000 years, just like the others. But while most Forsaken were preserved in stasis, Balthamel's body began to rot and decay due to the way he was trapped. By the time the seals weakened and he was freed, he was no longer a man, he was a living corpse. His flesh had withered away, and his once handsome face had become a hideous, monstrous mask of decay. 10. Aegonar. Aegonar, originally known as Ishamael Chuain, was one of the most brilliant but terrifying minds of the Age of Legends. Unlike most of the Forsaken, who were politicians, generals, or manipulators, Aegonar was a scientist first and foremost. His expertise lay in genetics, biological experimentation, and creating new forms of life. In the Age of Legends, Aegonar was a pioneer in advanced biological research, studying the very nature of existence and experimenting with ways to alter living beings. His work was both revered and feared, as he pushed the boundaries of science further than any other researcher of his time. Many saw him as a genius, while others whispered that his experiments were unethical and dangerous. When the Shadow began to rise, Aegonar saw an opportunity. He did not join the Dark One out of hatred or political ambition. He joined because he saw the Shadow as a means to further his experiments without restrictions. Under the Dark One's rule, there would be no laws, no morality, no ethics, only endless possibilities. Aegonar's greatest and most horrifying creation was the Trollocs, the monstrous, half-human, half-animal warriors that became the backbone of the Shadow's armies. He combined human, animal, and Shadow spawn DNA, creating an army of creatures that were stronger, faster, and more resilient than ordinary humans. However, In his rush to create the perfect soldiers, he also introduced an unintended side effect. Trollocs were violent, unstable, and had to be controlled by Myrddraal, another of his creations. But like Balthamel, Aegoner's story did not end with his death. The Dark One reincarnated him as Ozengar, giving him a second chance to serve the Shadow. However, much like his first life, he was ultimately doomed by his own arrogance, and he was eventually discovered and eliminated before he could do any true damage. Aegoner's greatest strength was his intelligence, but his greatest weakness was his belief that he was untouchable. Despite his vast knowledge, he underestimated the forces of the light, leading to his downfall. 11. Arengar. Arengar is unique among the Forsaken because she was not part of the original 13 during the War of Power. Instead, she is the reincarnation of Balthamel, one of the first Forsaken to die after being released from imprisonment. After his death, the Dark One reincarnated Balthamel into a new body, but with a shocking twist, he was reborn as a woman. This was not merely an accident or a cruel joke from the Dark One, it was a strategic decision. Arengar retained all of Balthamel's memories, skills, and intelligence, but now had the ability to channel Saidar, the female half of the One Power, instead of Saidin. This change gave Arengar a powerful advantage, as few suspected that a former male Forsaken could now wield female magic, making her infiltration efforts far more effective. She used this to infiltrate the rebel Aes Sedai, gaining influence while working to sabotage the forces of the light from within. Despite her new form, Arengar remained much like Balthamel, cruel, sadistic, and obsessed with pleasure. She cared little for loyalty and had no grand ambitions beyond indulging her own desires and chaos. This ultimately led to her downfall, as her recklessness and arrogance made her an easy target. Her reincarnation proved that the Dark One had the power to reshape his chosen, keeping his most useful tools alive in new and unexpected ways. 12. Ozengar. Just as the Dark One reincarnated Balthamel into Arengar, he did the same with Aegoner, bringing him back as Ozengar. While Arengar was given a completely new body and identity, Ozengar's transformation was more subtle. He retained his male form and many of his old traits, but was given a fresh start in a new world. Ozengar, like his previous self, was primarily a scientist rather than a warrior or strategist. He was one of the weakest of the Forsaken in terms of political influence, and rather than openly seeking power, he preferred to work in secret, conducting experiments and assisting in the Shadow's war effort behind the scenes. Unlike Forsaken like Demandred or Graendal, who sought dominance and control, Ozengar was a coward at heart, avoiding direct confrontations whenever possible. He was not interested in ruling nations or leading armies, he simply wanted to continue his twisted research. His downfall was his lack of caution. While working undercover, he was discovered and swiftly eliminated, proving that even among the Forsaken, there was no room for weakness. Ozengar's story highlights the fact that not all of the Forsaken were leaders or warriors, some were simply tools of destruction, meant to serve rather than command. 13. Sindain. Sindain is perhaps the most tragic of all the Forsaken, because unlike Arengar and Ozengar, who were minor figures, she was once Lanfear, the most powerful female channeler of her age. After her apparent death in the collapsing Portal Stone world, the Dark One did not let her soul escape his grasp. Instead, he reincarnated her into a weaker body, stripping her of much of her former power and ensuring that she could never again rival the greatest channelers. The name Sindain means last chance, a cruel reminder that Lanfear had failed the Shadow and was being given one final opportunity to prove her worth. Despite her diminished strength, Sindain remained one of the most dangerous Forsaken, especially because her hatred for Rand al'Thor, Luz Therin, had only deepened. No longer obsessed with possessing him, she now sought to destroy him for rejecting her. Her interactions with Moridin, Ishamael's reincarnated form, suggest that she was no longer truly free. She was bound to his will, forced to serve in ways she never had before. This, perhaps, was the greatest punishment of all for someone who once sought absolute power. Sindain represents the tragic fall of Lanfear, once the most beautiful, powerful, and ambitious of the Forsaken. She was now a diminished tool of the Shadow, cursed to serve a cause that had long since betrayed her. The Forsaken's legacy, the Dark One's chosen. The Forsaken are more than just villains, they are symbols of different kinds of corruption. Each one represents a different aspect of human weakness, ambition, and betrayal. Some, like Ishamael, sought to unmake existence itself. Others, like Rand and Ishamael, were driven by jealousy and hatred. Graendal and Semirage embraced cruelty and decadence, while Moghedien and Asmodean preferred to work from the shadows. What makes them truly terrifying is that they were once the greatest minds of their age, proving that power and knowledge alone do not make someone righteous. Their impact on the world shaped the fate of the Wheel, ensuring that the battle between light and shadow would continue until the end of time.